This is the Loaded Radio Podcast.
All right, hey, what's going on? And a happy new year to you. It's Scott Penfold here with you on the first edition in 2023 of the Loaded Radio Podcast. And great to be here back again with the podcast, which is now going to be dropping every week, courtesy of everyone here at Loaded Radio and loadedradio.com. So definitely hyped about that for the new year. And what I wanted to do, though, for the first podcast of the year, I wanted to play back an interview I did at the end of 2022, so the end of last year, that I wasn't able to get to, but it's still a very important interview. A very cool interview nonetheless with Anti-Flag lead singer and lead guitarist and main songwriter Justin Sane. Just a great guy there too, and a great conversation that we had about everything from Rage Against the Machine, and we even got a little bit political at some points because, after all, it's Anti-Flag, right? Now, Anti-Flag have the new album out called Lies They Tell Our Children. It's out now via Spine Farm, and this little band out of Pittsburgh, man, have certainly caused a ruckus for the last 30 years. Their first album dropping back in 1996, the album Die for the Government. This one, the new one, Lies They Tell Our Children, album number 13 for the punk band, and man, what an album it is as well. The album was recorded, produced, and mixed by John London, and it also features multiple notable guest appearances, including Rise Against, Tim McIlrath. Killswitch Engage's Jesse Leach is on there as well, and the band say about the album, 30 years of Anti-Flag. If we're being completely honest, this mile marker of longevity is both unbelievable to us and at the same time, not a shock at all. And it was great to speak to Justin at the end of 2022. I'm going to play that interview for you back right now. Here it is, me and Justin Sane, frontman for the band Anti-Flag, right here on the Loaded Radio Podcast. Now the new album, Lies They Tell Our Children, that's a product of the pandemic. Is that correct?
Well, to be honest, no. It's I guess it's a little bit of both, but we were kind of moving away from the pandemic, and that was sort of what kicked off writing a record. And obviously, you can argue we're still in a pandemic. I guess technically we are, but obviously, people are moving forward in the world again after being vaccinated. And that was sort of what happened to us. During the pandemic, we mostly kind of shut it down. We weren't really that interested in writing a record away from each other. And we really weren't together for about a year and a half as a result of the pandemic, because a couple of the guys in the band just had young kids. My dad is very elderly, and during the pandemic, I was his main caregiver. So we were pretty leery about getting together until after we were vaccinated.
Sure.
And so kind of, the fact that we were able to get together and that the world hadn't completely opened up, that kicked off us writing a record, because we had a lot of time, on our hands. So in that respect, it was, but that time didn't last too long. Pretty quickly, shows were happening again. We were offered a festival, and we sort of moved from writing back into the world of touring.
Now, would you say that the recording of this album was a different sort of execution than, say, it could have been with 2020 Vision or any other album? Because we did, because the world hadn't completely opened up whenever we started to write, what it did is give us a lot of time to write, and it gave us time to be in a room together and write. And we didn't really do that so much on 2020 Vision. For 2020 Vision, a lot of the songs were kind of written individually and then sort of brought in, and then kind of kicked around by the band. Where with this record, that process was similar, but I just think that there was a lot more collaboration on the songs once an initial idea was sort of hashed out. So if I came in with a song idea that was, maybe for example, on Laugh, Cry, Smile, Die, I had that chorus written, and then, the guys were like, well, yeah, this is cool.
here's some ideas of where we could go with it. And we kind of kicked around a lot of ideas of what to try for the verses and for the other parts of the song. And in that respect, I think there was a lot more collaboration on Lies They Tell Our Children than on 2020 Vision.
Well, you just mentioned the song Laugh, Cry, Smile, Die. Silverstein's Shane Told was involved in that. How did he get involved in that song?
Yeah, well, we had a lot of ideas about how to release the record. And there's a couple different takes on how we ended up having so many guest vocalists. Number two will tell you that he kind of had already envisioned there being a vocalist for every time we dropped a song. And I'm sure he did, but I think that was sort of just an idea percolating around in his head. The idea that we would actually do it or not, I think, is another question, Right. For me, what happened with the songs was, we often will have like a friend sing on a song on a record. It's not too out of the ordinary. But because the songwriting was such a collaborative process, and just when I would hear like certain parts in songs that were clearly influenced by another band or by friends, like I saw it as an opportunity to like look at the songs and say like, wow, who would sound cool on this song? Is there a part on a song that fits a specific individual? And for me, like that particular down bridge or that down verse on that song, I could just hear Shane's voice in there. That was for me where Shane came from. But because of the pandemic, we had 2020 Vision released and we played about, we did a European tour on it, and then we played one show on it in North America, and then the pandemic hit and we were shut down. So we played in Ottawa, and then the next night, like that was it. It was crazy.
Right.
So one of our concerns was, coming out of the pandemic, it wasn't totally clear where things would go, and would things end up shutting down again? Would music have to take a back seat again? So we did have a concern about just releasing a record traditionally again, and then not being able to play the songs out. So, the idea of releasing the songs one by one over a certain amount of time, that was something that really interested us, because we could see that we were supposed to be on tour during these times. And we thought, well, it'd be really cool if A, the tour actually happens, and B, if when we're touring, people already have some of these songs in their hands. And then that way, if there is something unforeseen as time goes by and we're not able to play shows again, at least we've been able to experience some of this music with the audience.
Also, you were mentioning that there are a few special guests on the album. Who else appears on the record?
Well, Sharita from Pink Shift is on there, and I really love that she's on there because, she, I think in a lot of ways is like the voice of future punk. We're like four old white guys who have been playing punk for 30 years.
Sure.
And I think we have something valuable to contribute. Otherwise we wouldn't bother. But it's cool that there's, punk is alive and well in the younger generations. And she's a great reflection of that. Pink Shift is a really exciting band. And I think, she's very visionary, and the issues that she's talking about and the way she performs is really incredible. Stacey D from Bad Cop is on there, and
cool.
A really special, friend of ours, somebody that I really respect. And obviously Tim from Rise Against is on there. Brian Baker from Bad Religion. North American audience won't be as familiar with Die Totenhosen, or the Dead Trousers as it's translated into English. But they're sort of like a legendary German punk band. And Campino, who is their lead singer, he appears on the single that we just dropped most recently, Victory or Death. And Campino is like, he's basically like Mick Jagger of Germany. Die Totenhosen is, one of the most legendary bands in Germany, even within the punk scene, but even outside of the punk scene. And they're just like a really amazing example of people who really stayed in touch with their roots and what they were about and taking care of other people, even though they became so famous. And we've toured with them a number of times in Germany. And so it was just like really special that for us that, we could kind of bridge a cultural barrier or bridge an ocean by having him on the record. That was something that was really exciting for us.
Yeah, definitely. And I got to check out that band. I love the name alone. I got to check out that band now. They sound killer, dude. Now, who produced the album?
So we worked with John Lundeen. It's amazing. Like, he just like is somebody that sort of filled in the gaps when we had him. And just somebody that was like super efficient as far as recording and just really getting into it and making sure that we had what we had to have. I mean, we kind of, as with most of our records, we had, it was done, but we recorded it. We tracked with him for only 2 weeks. So we came in really knowing what we were doing, which is always good,
Yeah, sure.
Like you show up to a recording session, don't know the songs, that makes it really, really hard.
Yeah, I guess.
On the other hand, he just tightened everything up and just kept our ship on track, which, when you work with a good producer, he's a great engineer, that just always helps a record come together and kind of get to where it needs to get. I just felt like if we kind of felt like we were up against a brick wall, he had an answer, which was really cool.
Please tell me about the name of the album, the album title, Lies They Tell Our Children. Where did that one come about for you guys?
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of the coolest part about the record, other than just the actual songs, which I really love. But we sort of kind of had this idea of a concept for the record, which was, what are the critical issues that we're facing in the world right now? Mm-hmm. And because we kind of had this feeling that if you can identify those issues and talk about where they came from, that's sort of the first step in addressing them. And so one of the, obviously global climate change, it's probably the most existential issue that human beings have ever faced. And, so we kind of took some time to learn some new things, do some research. And so that issue is kind of on that forefront. It just kind of goes to show that it showed me that wow, there's still so much out there in the world that I can learn that I don't know. But what's really interesting about the issue of global climate change is that the oil companies actually were some of the first entities to identify the fact that burning all this carbon was warming up the planet.
Right.
And, they have scientists, obviously, to do all kinds of geological work, to search for oil, to research all facets of being an oil company. And their scientists were actually kind of discovering that, wow, our product is warming the planet. And obviously that was really bad for profits. That was definitely not something that the oil companies were excited to have people, become aware of and be concerned about. Because obviously there were other scientists who were studying this and they were raising the same alarm bells.
Yeah.
So what the oil companies did is they launched a massive PR blitz to discredit any science saying that fossil fuels are bad for the planet, bad for humanity. Part of that blitz was a 1983 op-ed in the New York Times, and it was called Lies They Tell Our Children. And it was just disinformation about global warming that was actually put out by Mobil Oil.
Wow.
And you can find it. You can just Google it. It's there,
Yeah.
And what's actually so unbelievable to me is that pretty much any falsehood that you've ever heard about global warming came from a PR firm that was hired by the oil companies.
Well, sure. It all comes down to the mighty dollar, right? It's
well, it really does, but it's just amazing to me that so many arguments that have been held up as, scientifically proven or just very credible are completely not credible.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And it's so crass that these companies, you're right. It did come down to the almighty dollar. They were much more concerned about keeping their profits safe than like actually working on something that was best for the planet.
I mean, not to really go down the rabbit hole too much, but I mean, the fact that we are destroying our planet essentially for something we created and only exists because we say it exists, which I'm talking about money, of course. It's really kind of like a sad, almost circular just descent into what we're becoming, which I find completely sad.
Well, sure. And it's, yeah. And what I did find kind of exciting in certain ways and like gave me hope was that you realize, like, when you start to look at a lot of like existential problems that face the country and that face the world, a lot of these things aren't that old. And I mean, outside, of course, of like slavery and war and,
of course.
some horrible things. But on the other hand, for example, like this hard push towards discrediting global warming, it's not an issue that we've been facing for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's fairly new. Right. And that gives me hope that, hey, there's the possibility to actually do something about it. And, it is kind of interesting in the world because, like, obviously we've been a band for almost 30 years now. And it's like, I can tell you right now that like things in so many ways have gotten better, even if it doesn't feel that way. Like when we started as a band, we were really aware of global climate change, but I mean, you would be laughed about when you talked about it.
Yeah, that's right.
Or like racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, like all of those issues. There's a lot of work to do on those issues. I'm not saying things are perfect because they're not. Mm-hmm. But when I was a kid growing up where I grew up, I mean, people would use the N-word. They would use homophobic slurs. I mean, it was just like nonstop. And, a big part of being, starting the band and the kind of messages that we wanted to put forward had to do with saying that these things are wrong. And I think that, the fact that like there were so many artists and musicians and activists and people that continually hammered on the door of these issues to make a shift in society. And the fact that shift has happened, the fact that these are issues that are actually like on mainstream news, like they're talked about by politicians. Like, Joe Biden just signed a bill saying that gay marriage is something that should be available and should be legal. That's right. Joe Biden in the 90s was against gay marriage. He actually voted against gay marriage. He voted for the Defense of Marriage Act. Right. So you realize that there has been a shift and that we have to keep pushing forward, even though things, even though there's been progress. And I just want people to realize, like, don't give up and actually have some hope, because I do actually think that in the face of all of the challenges that we face today, I've seen so much progress. And with writing the record, I kind of felt hope as a result of kind of looking at where a lot of these issues came from.
Certainly so, man. And, as speaking about, some of these political issues that are brought up, which I think are in such a positive way. Another band you guys have had quite a relationship with would be Rage Against the Machine. How's the relationship with you guys?
Yeah, I mean, our biggest kind of champion in Rage was Tom Morello. He kind of discovered the band on our second record. And it was pretty funny is he bought our record and he was trying to contact us to ask us to go on tour with Rage Against the Machine. And we didn't have like any contact information in our record.
Oh, dude.
It was just like something that we overlooked, and we weren't on like a big record label. So it wasn't easy to like find us, you know?
Right.
And he actually wrote a letter to us, and it was like, you know, "Dear Anti-Flag, this is Sean Morello from Radio 13." And he sent it to like our post office box in Pittsburgh. And so that was cool. You know, like Tom's always been somebody that's been a champion of us. The other guys in the band were always great to us, but we just happened to collaborate with Tom, mostly because Tom was out there looking for people to collaborate with, which he kind of is kept doing to this very day.
And you guys have done some pretty historic, well, I don't even go if I call them gigs, but demonstrations with the band too.
Yeah, the RNC in 2008?
Yeah.
And just a lot of different, a lot of things that we've done with Tom over the years. I mean, it's cool because, you know, Tom actually just really believes in getting out and supporting people and being there in person, and we do too. So just, you know, we kind of met each other at the right time. And I saw recently that Tom was down on the picket line with sex workers and strippers in
right.
Los Angeles. You know, like he just kind of, if he sees it and he can be there, he will be. And you know, that kind of support is important because and just showing people who are struggling that you care, that to me, honestly, like is radical. You know, kindness is radical, and it honestly like gives people hope. It gives them like a inspiration to not give up and to believe that what they're fighting for can be accomplished. And I've just seen that over and over again in my lifetime. And so Tom, obviously somebody that I have a lot of respect for, and he's just all around cool dude.
Justin, you're the best, dude. Thank you so much for the time, man. It's been a great talk, dude. I really do appreciate it.
Anytime. Great to talk to you. Thanks a million, and take good care of yourself.
There he is. That's Justin Sane, frontman for Anti-Flag, and the new album, Lies We Tell Our Children, is available now, and I strongly recommend that you give that a listen, especially if you're a fan of the band. Well, obviously, you probably heard it already, or just give it a listen if you just like straight up punk, if you like it hard. This is your kind of stuff, man, definitely. But my name is Scott Penfold, here with you on the Loaded Radio podcast. As we get ready to relaunch the podcast, if you will, in the days ahead, it's going to be sort of a new way that it's delivered to you, a new way that it's sort of built. I mean, you'll still get it on all the outlets that we provided on, like Spotify and Deezer and things like that. But just the actual podcast itself is just going to be a little bit different. We're still going to have the interviews with some of the biggest names in hard rock and metal, but as well, we're going to have some more content in there for you and just make it an all-around cooler podcast. And it's going to be dropping every week for you as well, okay? So get ready for that. First one coming up for you next week with Vil Vallo, formerly of Him. He's got the new album out called Neon Noir, so we're going to be talking about that extensively with Vil Vallo next week right here on the Loaded Radio podcast. Don't forget, in the meantime, always check out loadedradio.com on a daily basis for all your hard rock and metal news. It is constantly updated as well. The 24-hour online radio station is there for you too, complete with live personalities and tons of great stuff there. More interviews there, tons of great features too. That's available to you at loadedradio.com or via the free Loaded Radio app, which you can get at your app store, or of course again at loadedradio.com. The app gives you access to past podcasts as well as tons of other cool stuff. And again, the radio station, which is pretty darn good, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop metal for you. And live personalities. Yes, live personalities. Can't go wrong with that. A rare thing in this day and age when it comes to radio. All right, so check it all out for yourself. I'll talk to you again next week right here for an all-new edition of the Loaded Radio podcast.
Loaded Radio.